Stewart Lee's comedy act fills the biggest arenas, and he's been doing it for more than 25 years. He's one of the greatest successes of modern stand-up. He says he's a comic who investigates that territory between what's acceptable and what's shocking, and it's the same in his writing. He says his 5 years of collected newspaper and magazine pieces in Content Provider, the new book, are meant to make you smile and then to be used for lining a cat litter tray. But they do also bristle with all his passions. Welcome. Stewart, dealing with a live audience is one thing. You're playing with them, you're using them, you're feeding off them. Writing for the page, this is a collection of newspaper and magazine pieces, is quite a different thing. Do you find it easy to adapt?
I don't find there's anything that I write for stand-up that I can move across to newspaper columns, and I don't find there's anything vice versa in newspaper columns that I can move across to stand-up, because the thing is so different. What is interesting, though, is this idea that in some ways stand-up's a live art form, and as such you're shaped by an audience response. And the funny thing about writing for papers now is there is this audience response. You can look at the below-the-line comments, you can look at feedback, and so you can sort of interact with them, and you can change the character to aggravate or patronise even more the people that are reading. Well, you can't do it in real time, you have to do it over like years.
Well, you raised some interesting points there, actually. You're a polemical guy. Anybody who reads anything you write or listens to you on stage will know the people for whom you have contempt, let's put it like that, or the things that are going on in the country you don't like. I want to ask you something about that. Isn't there a problem in this country at the moment that all the people who do your sort of job, or 90% of them, have the same political opinion?
Yeah.
That they'll take the skin off anybody as long as it's not Jeremy Corbyn. Why isn't there anybody who'll take him apart?
Well, I think that a lot of mainstream media is doing that job perfectly well on its own. But I think
that's a cop-out.
Well, it's an interesting problem, right? Certainly, I'm not sure what to do now, because, like you say, most people that work in the arts probably have a particular point of view politically, majority of them, and yet.
Well, I'm thinking about stand-up comics particularly.
Well,
there's a general view.
Yeah, people say that, but I don't know. I don't know that that's the case. There seems to be. You're kind of reading the Daily Mail that these people are left-wing comedians, and I don't necessarily see it coming through in their lifestyle choices or the work they do. I think that it's just a way of dismissing them to the audience of that paper, So I'm not really. I certainly don't. I don't see where this imaginary. There doesn't seem to be that kind of content being created with that political angle in the volume that people imagine it is.
Maybe you've got something there, but I think just reading your collected pieces and knowing your view, particularly of the present government and its predecessor government, which is a fairly poisonous view, which you're entitled to, of course, it just strikes me that, let's take what people call the Corbyn revolution. There is no one looking at that with the same critical eye in that form as a comic art, or at least if they are, they're not very well known.
Yeah.
And that's a very one-dimensional way of making ourselves laugh at ourselves.
I did half an hour on press attitudes to Corbyn on the TV last time, in the last series, which was a sixth of the series. And I wrote a column 2 weeks ago about the train thing.
Yeah.
So,
well, that is a comic episode. You're perfectly entitled to have a go at the media in general, or indeed, the government in general. I'm just surprised that, since we're talking about Corbyn, he seems, as far as many comics are concerned, to be off limits. You can't make fun of him. Why not?
I think that it is covered. I just think the problem is it's not as funny. It's not as funny, or it's not as funny, and it's not as likely to inspire you in a passionate way as the things that are happening on the other side of the house. So which you could argue, given the chaos that the country's descended into in the last few months, as a result of people, many of whom are still in government, has actually got off incredibly lightly, because broadcasters are very worried about appearing to make fun of it into definite terms, because of the extent to which their future is beholden to the people on that side of the house.
If you look at our present condition in this country, what bugs you most?
What bugs me most? It's difficult to know how to move forwards doing stand-up or sort of funny columns.
Yes.
Because everything is so in flux at the moment. There isn't a clear plan forwards post-Brexit. We don't know what our international relationships are. We don't even know which politicians are going to rise or fall in the next 6 months. It's very unpredictable. So now, I've got to file a column for Sunday. And the worrying thing is you could put something in on Thursday, and the person you've written about may have lost their job by Saturday.
Yeah.
And also, the public mood seems to swing backwards and forwards very quickly now, depending on what information they're given. So it's really hard it's hard at the moment to know how to write in opposition it's hard to know how to take a comic position against an accepted truth, because it's not clear what the accepted truths are, because we know the country's split 50-50, isn't it?
Yeah. It's an interesting point that you think that people don't have a settled view of where we're going.
Yeah.
You feel that sense of uncertainty quite strongly?
I do, and I mean, an interesting thing now is I'll be going out on the road in the autumn with a new show. And, you know, partly out of my genuine beliefs, but partly out of as a comic position, you know, my role on stage is a sort of metrosexual, slightly out-of-touch liberal. But I know now that 52% of the country have taken a kind of political stand, broadly speaking, against against the values of that class. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays around the place. Obviously, an audience going to a theatre, on some level, it's been thinned out, or there's a filter on it. But it's an interesting time to be content provider. And I didn't really think about how that name is a bit of a fluke as well, content provider. It was sort of catch-all joke title for the book. But now there is a kind of question about what sort of content do you provide to the country.
Are you one of the people who always likes to be in a minority? Would you ever be worried if most people agreed with your political position and you weren't in a minority?
I think it would make doing stand-up harder, because it's nice to occupy an opposition position, because I think that on some level, all comedy is about tragedy. The stand-up is a clown on some level, and the clown, for me, the tragedy of it is that his ideals or hopes are continually defeated by reality. So it would be problematic if you suddenly found yourself on the winning side, you know, and then I think it would feel like you were the cheerleader of some horrible rally, rather than this tragically frustrated figure railing against the dying of the light, you know. So I think there's an interesting thing in that.
Stuart Lee, thanks very much.